Hi, I'm Bailey White, and this is Undecided. It's a show about politics with no politicians. It's a show about an election campaign with no campaign promises. We're calling it Undecided because so many voters are undecided. Look at the polls, 30%, 40% of voters don't know who to vote for, don't know if it's worth voting at all, and a lot of them will stay home on Election Day. We're starting this series here at Plaza Bowl in St. John's, asking that question: is it worth voting? Who should you vote for? What's the point? By the end of the night, we hope to have an answer for you. So we'll start by thanking our guests for joining us, and maybe I can get you to introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Urquhart, and I live here in St. John's.
I'm Drew Brown. I'm editor of the Newfoundland Labrador Independent, and I live here in St. John's.
I'm Vicky Mullally. I'm a comedian, and I also live here in St. John's.
So we will do a little bit of bowling later. So show of hands, is anybody a good bowler? Medium bowler?
Definitely not. I'm going to have a lot of gutter balls, I can assure you.
I'll give you a run for your money on that.
What about a good voter? Like, Caitlin, do you always vote?
I always vote.
Yeah.
It's. I think it's really important, personally.
Drew?
I've always voted. I've been, not necessarily because I think it's good to always get out and vote for, cast a legitimate ballot, but it's nice to go and at least register your protest if you don't want to vote for one of the real options.
And Vicky?
I've been guilty in the past of not paying attention when I was younger, but have since, always have been voting in many recent years.
So how are we all feeling in the lead up to this election? Drew, you talk about registering your protest. Like, is that something that's on your mind this time around?
Me personally, yeah, I genuinely, I'm not sure who I'm going to vote for in this election. I'm not sure who's going to be running in my district, and there may not be a candidate for me to vote for or even protest vote for, so it's definitely something for me to think about.
Caitlin, do you know who you'll vote for already?
I don't know who I'm going to vote for yet. I always like to look at the policies and platforms before I make a decision.
Vicky?
I also am undecided. Just going to see whose views line up best with mine and where I want to see the province progress to.
I guess what got me thinking about this is, I don't see anybody out there right now on the campaign trail proposing any sort of radical change. Like, it's a lot more of the same, frankly, if I can say it that way, and look at different jurisdictions. Like, you look at what's happening in PEI right now with the Green Party, for instance, or you look at Ontario. Whatever you think of Doug Ford, like, you have an opinion about him. Is that your feeling too? And anybody can jump in here and answer this. Do you have that this sort of just more of the same, nothing crazy going on here?
Yeah, I think part of it is kind of a lack of leadership in some ways. Like, there's no one who's proposing. We don't know everyone's platforms and what they're going to be yet, but I don't foresee a lot of real radical change. In my view, the one party that often is proposing more radical ideas, the NDP, is unlikely to have enough seats to actually realize any of those ideas. So things like universal childcare and pharmacare and housing strategy and those types of issues that tend to require more like systemic change aren't really sort of seeing the light of day. We're seeing a lot of small incremental changes in terms of platforms.
Yeah, it's a bit ironic that the election sort of kicked off to be a contest of visions, because it doesn't necessarily seem like there is a contest of visions yet. The provincial government has its budget and its various plans and stuff, but all that sort of seemed to come together very recently in the last, let's say, month. There are still many unknown quantities in what the Liberals are proposing, but just as many as in what the Conservatives are proposing, and they're not necessarily even radically different proposals between the two. And like Caitlin's saying, the NDP is sort of on the ropes at the moment. The NL Alliance is also a very unknown quantity and will run a few candidates, but for the most, there are 40 districts in the province. Most of us, I think, won't have that many different things to choose from, especially if it's just Liberal and Conservative.
And Vicky, anybody particularly speaking to you right now?
I'm still pretty undecided. I'm trying to keep up with the news and see all the releases that are happening. It it's important to me to see the potential increase in arts funding. The budget said it's going to be going up by $1 million, which is a great step in the right direction. Again, not a radical change, but definitely a step in the right direction. It's nice to see, but there's still a long way to go.
I mean, if it's as you say, Drew, like most of us in the different 40 districts won't have that many choices, won't have that much of a spread, I guess.
Yeah.
What is the point?
I mean, it's difficult, right? I mean, the classic low barrel argument was always, if you don't vote, you don't get to complain. I mean, in my experience, the Newfoundlanders' right to complain is inalienable, regardless of who you do or do not vote for. But yeah, I mean, in the case where there are probably going to be a few districts where it's going to be like a government incumbent, and then maybe the Tories will have somebody to run an opposition. Maybe it'll be a good sort of full-fledged candidate, maybe not. But at this point, I mean, the best you can do is just, I guess, like look at who's running, like who you have, and hope that there's somebody you can live with voting for, and if not, I don't know, I guess reconcile yourself to the fact that even if you don't like one of the options, somebody has to win anyway, and you're going to get stuck with a representative.
Then you end up with like what's the least bad option, you know? Yeah.
That's so discouraging, though.
Yeah.
Like, it's, you know, people don't, and I find this is true too, that a lot of times people don't get voted in, they get voted out, right? Yeah. Like you vote, I can't stand looking at them anymore. Somebody else, I don't care who, anybody take a turn at it, right? But at least that's a feeling, as long as more so than, yeah.
And I guess that sort of comes down to, like, again, that's less because like anyone's really giving us different ideas to choose from, and it's more like we have a couple different teams of managers, and after a while you get sick of one and you don't think they're doing a good job, so you want to switch things up and replace them with another set of managers. Yeah. But the projects don't ever change.
I mean, to what extent is that our own fault? Like, we do keep voting these people in. What if nobody showed up? You know, like, or I mean, nobody is coming forward with this radical idea. Do we get what we deserve?
I mean, I guess the one thing, and to Drew's point about the protest vote, is that if you don't show up and you don't vote, then your non-vote is registered as apathy rather than protest. Like if you spoil your ballot, that's saying, I don't think either of these candidates or any of these candidates are suitable, I'm going to spoil my ballot. And that's registered, I think, as a protest rather than as just, I don't care, which ends up being a vote for the status quo by default.
So what would make that better, I wonder? What is it, you know, maybe they should show the list of spoiled ballots, you know? There was 100 for the PCs, 100 for the Liberals, and 100 spoiled. That would tell you something.
Yeah, or they should include like none of the above on the ballot or something. And if none of the above wins, you got to have a new election maybe.
And well, that's part of the idea of proportional representation and other forms of like alternative vote, is that you give people also, not only do you give them different ways to spoil their ballot, but you also give them ways to rank different candidates so that they can pick their favorite candidate, even if they think it's a long shot, if they think it's an underdog candidate, they can still choose that as their first, and then they can rank down for other candidates so that they also they have their least bad next alternative, right? You kind of create those options.
And so then it's not like a total Hail Mary, well, it's lost, no, but at least I stuck to my principles or whatever.
Yeah, and then you're less likely to get situations now where, like, let's say you got like 3 candidates running and it's a tight race, one person gets like 34% of the vote, then they win everything, and then the other 66 or whatever percent of people, their votes don't necessarily count, right? It doesn't, in the same way that if you at least got to rank your preferences, you would have a bit more of a say in, you know, who is your rep.
Time now for a game I like to call Fantasy Premier. I want to know what makes a good premier. What's a good quality to have? You know, think about it like a mystery date or dream date, blind date, whatever. Nothing weird, strictly political. But what would make a good premier? Somebody that you would want to say, I want to vote for them. Caitlin?
So, I mean, I think somebody who has good judgment, who's going to listen and understands how to consult with people, with stakeholder groups, and make sure that the voices of the constituents, and not just those who voted for them, but of all constituents, are heard.
Drew?
I mean, good judgment, definitely top priority. I would like a premier who is like a real person, who like if you ask them questions, that will give you like a real answer that a human being would say, and not necessarily like a robot filled up with PR textbooks. So for me, that's like top tier. Real person, good judgment, and yeah, mostly just I would settle for a real person at this point. My bar is that low.
Vicky, what do you think?
I agree with both of those for sure. Yeah, just be transparent. Talk to us like we're all adults. Just be straight up and listen to us. Yeah.
I just feel like that person would get voted out of office so fast. You want them to be honest? You want them to be normal? You want them to admit when they're wrong? Like, we don't reward that kind of behavior, though, do we?
Yeah, this sounds like less of a person we vote for and more of a person we like draft through a lottery system or at gunpoint or something. Yeah.
Be honest in combination with being a good person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And I think like part of it though is having that integrity, and this goes with judgment, right? If you have strong like values and morals that people can understand and get behind, then you know that that's going to inform everything that they do. That's going to inform the way in which they behave as a politician, one would hope. And I think, I think that some of the challenge of what we've seen, for example, with Trudeau, is that he was very charismatic and likable, absolutely, and had all these great ideas for massive change to the status quo. Unfortunately, we haven't really seen a lot of those things really moving forward, and so I think people get a bit disillusioned, and that, when you think about it, that's often what happens.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think it's like, and that's why I think like the emphasis on like the realness is so important, because it's not just like, honestly, I think like Newfoundland has had too many like unrealistically positive politicians where they'll just come out and say everything is great, it's the best, we're doing real good, everything's fine, please do not look behind the curtain. But like, even though we know like things are clearly not fine and like something is on fire back there, but if you keep coming out and telling us that like everything is good and we're the best, it makes it really hard to trust them. So like a politician that is like able to acknowledge they have maybe been wrong or made a mistake and like are capable of reflection and learning, maybe would be
You just automatically have so much more respect for that.
Yeah.
When someone can just own up to, like, we're all human, we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
Just own it. And show how you're gonna fix it.
Yeah.
Plus, some mistakes are pretty obvious, and if you can call it like it is, that counts for something. Yeah.
Rather than like trying to let it blow over and then hiding and then like waiting 3 weeks and being like, well, something messed up might have happened, but it's still not our fault, which is the traditional way that politicians handle their problems in this country.
Fantasy premier would be someone we can compare to Robin Hood instead of Robin Hood Bay. You know what I mean? In my opinion.
Is there anybody like completely wildly, out of any kind of context, anyone that you would look at, Newfoundlander, Labradorian, or someone else completely fictional person, whoever, anybody that you would say, now that's somebody who would be a good leader of this province?
I think there are lots of people who would be excellent and who have all the skills and abilities to do it, but whether or not we can attract those people to engage in the dogfight that is the current politics in this province. We've seen the harassment scandals. We know, the sort of sense of like, oh, well, this is just the way it is. That the House of Assembly is supposed to be this horrific workplace. Most people don't really want to sign themselves up for that. So I think we have to change the way we do politics in order to get any of those fantastic, incredible, ideal people.
brought.
Yeah, there's definitely a culture here that treats the like blood sport part of the politics as like not a bug but the feature, and like we like politicians that fight each other, and like, you know, like everyone will talk about, oh, things are so bad here, we need to change things, but like we also at the same time, like anybody who tries to say something like different gets like yelled at immediately. And then it's like called like a moron because they thought they might do something different. Like it's really like there's these two contradictory impulses. Like we're mad all the time about the state of things, but we're also mad at anybody who tries to fix it.
And we reward that bad behavior, right? Like if somebody acts like a baby, if somebody throws a fit and, you know, behaves like a child, that's rewarded, right? Because that's you're being a tough guy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's on all of us, I think. Like, we can't just say, oh, well, those guys are getting on again. Like, we reward this kind of thing.
There's definitely, like, the more time I've spent at the House of Assembly and watching question period and stuff, the more I get this intense, like, flashback to, like, junior high gym class with the guys in the locker. It's definitely, there's, like, a very, you know, like, all right, these are the guys that would, like, take my lunch money all the time. Cool.
I mean, why would anybody want to be a part of that?
It's super exclusive of a lot of people, right? From a lot of different diverse backgrounds.
Yeah.
It's a huge, and I mean, I think that we as voters need to think about our inherent bias. Unfortunately, when people think about what it means to be a leader, we often think about like an older white man.
Yeah.
And not intentionally, but we're so like, it's so indoctrinated into us that that's what we think of. So we need to kind of rethink what leadership looks like.
Yeah. So I guess just sort of in closing, somebody's going to be premier. Any final thoughts? Like any last words to the premier, just to say, you know, in one sentence or two, what do you want?
I would like to see the economy be more diversified. I think we should be investing in tech companies. I've worked in the tech industry. I've seen the importance, the demand, and it's where the future is headed. I mean, yes, the oil and gas industry is huge here, and it's very important in Newfoundland. But I do think that we should be diversifying, and we can get a lot more intelligent people back to Newfoundland who want to be in Newfoundland, and we can benefit from value added from immigrants that are coming, and have specialized skills that we could be, you know, they could be adding value to our province that we love.
My only real message to the inevitably incoming premier would be, please take your job seriously. I know it's really tempting to not do that because nothing in our political system is set up to force anyone to take this stuff seriously if they're not taking it seriously, but like it's a pretty serious job, and we need somebody that can think not just about the next like 6 months or even next election or 2 elections. Like this is a historical moment. We need somebody thinking about the big picture and the long game, and not just like what things are going to look like in 2025, 2030, but like 2040, 2050, through the end of this century, that's going to see really dramatic upheavals to almost everything we know about the way our society functions. So yeah, I just want the premier to be aware of that and to maybe give some indication that they are aware of that. Yeah.
Kaylin?
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously climate change and culture and our economy are really important pieces of any election platform. What I will be looking for is what I always look at, how our society treats the most vulnerable. So what is being done to protect and empower the most vulnerable and marginalized in our society? What do they have in place, or what plans do they have for pay equity? What are they thinking in terms of, there's been talk about regulating sex work in the province. I want to see that being done in consultation with sex workers and sex work advocates. And really, if we're going to be looking at these types of issues, we need to actually be looking at social determinants. If we want to take an exploitation frame, we need to make sure that people aren't vulnerable to exploitation. So that's talking about housing, that's talking about social assistance, that's talking about childcare. So if we make sure that people aren't vulnerable, then we can help prevent exploitation. And if we're not having that conversation and we're only talking about the reactionary fixes through criminal law and through regulation, then we're really not talking about how do we help the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. So that's what I hope, and that's certainly what I'm going to be looking for in every single platform. And if I don't see it, I certainly won't be voting for people who don't have that in there.
Lots of good advice for the Premier. I want to thank you all for joining me here at Plaza Bowl.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for watching. We'll be back in a couple of days with another segment of Undecided.